We're back on Michael Coren Live. We're talking about this book, The Holocaust Industry. It's a fairly small book, really, but dropped into the pond of political and moral debate. The ripples are being felt in many countries. Norman Finkelstein is someone, a Jewish man, parents were in the death camp. He's not a Holocaust denier. I mean, he knows it happened. He says there's been a moral and political and financial exploitation of the same. Let's get to the calls. Len is on line 9. Hi, Len.
Good evening, Michael.
Hi.
Mr. Finkelstein, I have read your book, and in that book you seek, in my opinion, to make a distinction between what you refer to as the uppercase and the lowercase Holocaust. The uppercase Holocaust is rooted in the realm of history, and in terms of Hilberg and others, seems really to hold your attention. But for the latter, in your book you consider it nothing better, and I quote, than the shelves upon shelves of schlock that now line libraries and bookstores. I have to admit, I'm puzzled by your position because fictionalized and semi-fictionalized accounts of the Holocaust, be it Mille 18 or The Wall or Sophie's Choice, are really no different than fictionalized accounts of the American Civil War or the Korean War or any other historical event. So that being the case, given your very clear contempt for people like Elie Wiesel, who you accuse of making the Holocaust unknowable through mystification, isn't it hypocritical of you to say, in essence, that the Holocaust is off-limits to imaginative approaches which can, in their own way, make the Holocaust more knowable? Where is the conspiracy in that?
Okay.
Well, I think you confuse what I wrote in the book. Nowhere do I say that fictional accounts of the Nazi Holocaust are illegitimate. Rather the contrary, I say. I grew up reading Leon Uris's Mille 18. I grew up reading John Hershey's The Wall, and they had a significant impact on me. The distinction is not between fictional and non-fictional accounts. The distinction is between non-fictional history, which is useful and which you can learn from, the classic studies, not only by Hilberg, but people like Henry Friedlander, Saul Friedlander, and the list is quite long. And then there's the other kind of quote-unquote history, which is not history at all. It's just an ideological weapon pretending to be history. So just as you mentioned a moment ago, the book by Daniel Goldhagen called Hitler's Willing Executioners. That pretends to be history. It's replete with footnotes. It has the imprimatur of Harvard University, where Mr. Goldhagen then taught, but it wasn't history at all. It was simply an ideological weapon. Its main thesis was that all the Goyim, all the Gentiles, all the Christians, all the non-Jews, they want to kill the Jews. That's his basic thesis. That's not history.
We must have read different.
Nonsense.
We must have read different books here, because I read that. I didn't get that. I disagree with him as a Christian of Jewish ancestry. I was deeply offended, as I mentioned to the PC Radio. It was a New Republic, wasn't it?
Yes.
Almost the entire issue, and I thought it was childish. It was hysterical. I thought it lacked historical research. I disagree with the thesis of his earlier book, but he didn't say that. What he said was, if you look at modern German history, particularly looking at 19th century German rationalism and Nietzsche and the idea of killing God and relative morality, that the Germans were the obvious people who would have committed the Holocaust. Now, we can disagree with that, but to say he's not a serious historian, he is a fairly serious historian.
No, there is no... Look, I hate to be quoting Mr. Hilberg again, but his first reaction to Goldhagen's book was, quote, "This is worthless." Goldhagen's book says...
That's an opinion, that's fine.
It's an opinion of a renowned authority. You know, if Einstein said a particular theory of physics was worthless, it carries some weight.
You can't compare science with history. One is an opinion, and one is objective fact.
We can't compare authorities in respective fields. Now, Mr. Goldhagen's thesis was that since the time of Martin Luther, for several hundred years, all the German people wanted to do was kill the Jews. They were straining at the bit to kill the Jews. Along came Hitler, he gave them the green light, and that explains the Nazi Holocaust. I'm sorry, that's not history.
Oh, he's wrong.
That's a comic book. But It was pawned as history. It was promoted as history, and it was a bestseller not only in the United States but worldwide.
Did he call anyone gangsters or hoodlums, or did he talk about Monte Carlo casinos?
He didn't call anyone gangsters.
I just want to establish what is serious history and what isn't.
Yeah, he just said that all the German people for the past 400 years have been genocidal murderers. I don't think that's a particularly enlightened piece of history.
I think he was wrong. I just don't remember him saying that. I think I think it was a fundamental misreading of Martin Luther, as many historians have done. There was a different, I don't want to get into Lutheranism too deeply, but there was certainly a different Martin Luther. He thought that as soon as the Reformed faith came along, the Jewish people would embrace Christianity. When they didn't, he said some things that were deeply regrettable. But I think what the author did was to construe too much from historical examples. But he was wrong. He was a historian with whom we disagree. And I think he got way too much play and press, I agree. But with all due respect, sir, I mean, some of the language you use in here, you're the serious historian and nobody else is?
No, I never said, first of all, the book is subtitled Reflections on the Exploitation of Jewish Suffering. Yeah. It doesn't claim to be, and I don't claim it to be, a great piece of history. Rather the contrary, my book is not about history. I defer to the historians who are knowledgeable on the topic. My book is how political organizations, Jewish organizations, exploit the history. Now, if we're going to get back to the question of language, allow me to remind you, I teach political philosophy. And go back and read, for example, Rousseau's Second Discourse on Inequality. Read Marx's Communist Manifesto. Read Tom Paine's Common Sense. Read Edmund Burke's Reflections on the French Revolution.
I've read all of those.
Okay, look at the language there.
Yeah.
Look at the language there. That's an awful polemical language. You know, Marx talks about capitalism springing into the world with blood pouring from all of its body. He talks about the capitalist money bags. Mr. Rousseau just rants and raves against the modern world using very colorful language. But does that disqualify serious discussion of their ideas? I admit, my language is not the language of many historians. But if we're serious, let's discuss the content.
Okay.
Were the Swiss banks subject to a blackmail campaign?
See, what you've done, and I think you do that in your work sometimes, is and you're trying to confuse people, I believe. You've thrown names around, and I do know my philosophy too. You haven't spoken about the other works written by men such as Rousseau, for example. You've actually named Rousseau. You've named his polemical work, and of course we could argue that some of Rousseau's influence was appalling, his anti-Semitism, his anti-Christian feeling, the French Revolution, the bloodshed. You've named Marx's polemical work rather than his economic and political philosophy.
I was quoting Das Kapital.
You were quoting the manifesto,
right, but
and it's journalism.
Well, I don't know, it's journalism which certainly has had a huge impact on political philosophy.
Sure it did, I'm not denying that. We have to rest of the calls as soon as we come back. I know it's a busy one, we'll get to more. I don't know, 2 minutes, whatever. See you then.